All right, welcome in, everybody. It is Tuesday. It's time for Full Court Press. We're here to talk Sweet 16, NIT. We missed you guys yesterday. I didn't know what to do with myself with no show and no games to bet on. I made about 12 pages of Major League Baseball notes, and you know what? That's not fun. Talking about games and then betting them is the fun part, so I am glad that we've got some of that to do today. Matt Winnick is back with us, and we actually do have somewhat of a structure the next couple days. So just quick programming note before I bring Matt in. Today, we're going to do the East region for the Sweet 16 and the entire NIT. Tomorrow, we're going to do the rest of the Sweet 16. We will also have our first Total Bases show tomorrow. So I'll be back at 9 a.m. with Brian Leonard and Tokyo Brandon. We'll do our first Total Bases, which will be at 9 a.m. every single day, basically from now for the foreseeable future. And then we will also, like I said, tomorrow we will also have the second half of the Sweet 16. So we love having you guys in the chat. Jump in the chat. Let us know what you're looking at. If you have like questions just about like general stuff, certainly drop them in there. But don't worry about asking for games because we're going to hit every single game over the course of the next 2 days. So without further ado, Matt Winnick, welcome in. How was your weekend? I saw you killing it with projections on Twitter all weekend.
Yeah, it was a fun weekend. It was a tiring weekend. I need to catch up on sleep, but that's also just like from November. I have lots of hours to rebank. But yeah, great hoops, fun hoops, and then like we kind of saved the best for last with that whole Iowa Florida stuff down the stretch on Sunday was awesome. That I did get wrong, but still a lot of fun.
Yeah, so if you are not following Matt on Twitter, you absolutely should be. He tweeted out, well, he tweets all his stuff out for free because Twitter is free. And there was a stretch, Matt, where I think you had like almost nailed the exact score on like 3 or 4 straight games. Am I accurate on saying that?
Yeah, I think at least, I mean, on Saturday, I think 9 of the 16 teams were within 3 points. That was fun. That was a good little run there.
I wish I was blindly betting your projections because I did not have the best weekend in college hoop. Well, that's the only thing I bet this weekend. So not the best weekend for me, but I was coming off of like such a massive championship week. And man, the NCAA tournament, it is just a tough, you just hope to survive at that point. And UCLA getting backdoored on Friday was sort of the, kind of like turned my luck a little bit, but I hope it's coming back in the other direction because on Sunday night, I had the St. Joe's Hawks, who had one of the, maybe one of the comebacks of the weekend that went relatively unnoticed because they put the NIT up against all of the biggest March Madness games of the week. So we're going to get to the NIT in just a minute, and we're going to hit all 4 NIT games today. But we've got to give the home office something to clip here. And so my trade-off for doing an entire show on the NIT was to do the biggest region of the Sweet 16 today. And there's no bigger region. There's no hotter ticket, Matt, than the East region down in Washington, D.C., where you get St. John's, Duke, Michigan State, and UConn. So if you are going to that, that's awesome. Shout out to you because that is going to be as good of a doubleheader as you could ask for the Sweet 16. Capital One Arena might make all their revenue back from no one going to Georgetown games in one shot because that should be a hot ticket. Matt, let's start with Duke St. John's, the first of those matchups on Friday night. This will be the last time I probably get to bring it up this year. The Siena Saints had Duke on the ropes, 13-point lead in the second half. And Duke turned it around. They came back. They won that game. The following game, I guess everyone just had Duke to win in a blowout, which they eventually did. But TCU for a half, what was very, very good. And I think they did a lot of that with their ball pressure and their guards really sort of pressuring Duke. To me, that's the only chance St. John's has here is to ramp the pressure up to an 11 out of 10. And turn defense into offense, something that we talked about, sort of ahead of the Kansas game that I talked about with Kelly Stewart over the weekend on Last Call. So talk to me, Duke, St. John's. Do you see St. John's with a chance here?
Oh, they definitely have a chance. Both of these teams, it's going to come down to one main thing. And for Duke, It's very, very simply, if you don't have Caleb Foster, which seems highly likely here, your only true point guard is Caden Boozer, and you are getting 40 minutes of press from St. John's. And if Caden Boozer's alone dealing with St. John's press, which Kansas couldn't do as a group, then Duke is in big trouble because their secondary ball handler is Cameron Boozer. And Cameron Boozer is so important to their offense and scoring the basketball. You cannot have him bringing the ball up first of all, he's not a true point guard. And second of all, it's going to exhaust him. He's going to be exhausted. Who is the secondary ball handler bringing the ball up on the press for Duke? I don't have an answer. All of their other guards are not ball handling guards. Isaiah Evans, Dame Sard, Nick Kamenya all have an under 10% assist rate. They are not there to handle the basketball at all. And Caden Boozer's been fine, but he is not the guy you want for 40 minutes handling St. John's pressure. That said, you can only set up that pressure if you score the ball. And St. John's is going to have issues putting the ball in the basket. Duke is going to do exactly what Kansas did defensively. They're going to stay at home. They're going to switch a lot. They're going to close off driving lanes, and they're going to say, we don't think you can shoot. Shoot the basketball, because Duke already allows a really high three-point rate. It's very hard to get inside against this team. And St. John's almost lost to Kansas, and Bryce Hopkins had the best three-point shooting game of his entire life, which is not going to happen again. So St. John's has to actually hit those threes with Ian Jackson, with Josan Sannon, with Dylan Darling, who all were ice cold from deep. And St. John's is not going to get as many offensive rebounds against Duke as they did against Kansas. So the question is, can Duke handle the pressure, but can St. John's make enough shots to be able to actually apply the pressure?
Yeah, no, that is, I think you sort of nailed it. So from a just trying to, sort of handicap the spread here, my number comes out Duke minus 6.01. So slightly shaded to the underdog. And assuming everyone is healthy. I think for me, what would put me on St. John's would be if I could sort of get wind of like Duke being less healthy than they're letting on. That being said, it does seem like they're sort of coming into this week in a much better situation than they were last week from a health standpoint. So I don't know if I'll, it feels like they're rolling into this game mostly healthy. Have you heard anything different, or is that kind of how you're like approaching it?
Well, they're probably not going to have Caleb Foster. I'd be very surprised if they did. And then they got Pat Gongba back, but he just looked so not healthy. And like maybe it changes in 5 days. He'll play, but it does not seem like he's going to be the Pat Gongba that he's been all year.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point because, I did read some things like, maybe Foster would give it a go. And it's like, I think if Duke, let's just assume Foster's out, and how many, I think Gongba played 13 minutes against TCU.
Minutes. Yeah.
I mean, if that ends up being the same, which I guess I was in my head, I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot of time now till Friday. But we've seen it's almost like we've seen, does every team like want to downplay their injury? It almost seems like every team wants to downplay their injuries. I mean, Billadou never steps foot on the floor for UCLA. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if that's what's happening here for Duke, I think I kind of lean towards St. John's on the number, just with the respect that, like, I do think their physicality can give Duke a hard time. And defense and just having like a good defensive game plan, but also being able to just out sort of tough them is probably how you're going to beat Duke. I mean, it was definitely, Sienna's plan was just play a certain type of defense and pray threes don't go in, which they kind of, got that ended up working for them. TCU guard pressure, which is basically what they've done all year, but Duke had a very efficient and like amazing offensive second half to blow that one open. So yeah, I kind of think St. John's can be in this if they just can clean up the glass on both ends of the floor and force turnovers. They have to force Duke. They have to turn Duke over, or they're going to get my concern for the Johnnies. Because again, this is the side I would prefer to be on here against the number, is that Duke gets them into like half court offense and they can't run half court offense. That would be my concern. but lean Johnny's against the number for me.
I mean, the thing is, like, they forced Kansas into 16 turnovers, but only 7 of those 16 turnovers were live ball turnovers. The other 9 were dead ball turnovers. And a dead ball turnover, while it's still a turnover and fantastic, it's still leading the half-court offense. And I still don't think St. John's is going to get much transition offense at all. They'll get a couple of those steals in the front court and just be able to go right up with it. But Duke is as good of a transition denial as there is in the country. And so this is still going to be a half-court affair. And, yeah, St. John's will pressure Duke, and St. John's will be physical against Duke. But inevitably, that only works if they can score in the half-court. And they just could not against Kansas, and Duke's an even better defense than Kansas is. So what you're saying is true, but it only matters if they can actually score the basketball. And Zuby Ejiofor is going to have to be a big part of that. Malik Brown is as good of a defender as there is in the country, but he does foul a ton. And St. John's was able to get Flory Badunga in early foul trouble. If Malik Brown's in early foul trouble and Pat Gongla's still like playing at 30%, like it seemed like he did against TCU, that's where Duke is probably in bigger trouble defensively.
Yeah, it'll pretty much the rest of the way. I think you could just about say that's about any game. Like it's going to be very interesting, and there's probably cases to be made for both sides. We're just at that point of the year where, you know, the lines are going to be tight. There's probably a case to be made for both sides. There's probably a path to victory for both teams. And so for me personally, that's kind of like one I'll be monitoring is the health of those Duke players, because I do think that gives St. John's just enough of an edge against the number to justify taking the points there. Mm. All right, let's head to the other semifinal. I already sort of brought it up. I would say for me, one of the most disappointing things of the entire first weekend was the fact that we didn't get a full strength UCLA against UConn. It was a spot that I sort of had circled as soon as the bracket came out. Fortunately, because Billadou was ruled out, I didn't even have action there. I didn't bet it, but I would have loved to see UCLA at full strength in that game. I think UConn would have likely went home if that was the case. That being said, Matt, UConn looked pretty good in that second half against UCLA. They didn't look great against Furman. I've been sort of anti UConn, especially against the number over the past couple weeks. I think I've sort of got that right. Got destroyed by St. John's in the Big East final. Lost, had a loss to Marquette down the stretch. Weren't great against the number. But, I start to look at this matchup. I start to look at this game, and so I'm kind of, I guess I'm not surprised where the fact that like my number likes UConn here. I'm closer to like 3.5 with UConn being a favorite. And I'm just, is there any way to talk myself into Michigan State? Because you know what? I want to like this Michigan State team here because I want to fade UConn. But my concern is they don't get any transition and they don't shoot the way they did against Louisville. That was my one bright spot over the weekend, Matt. I had Michigan State minus the points. And I got to be honest, I'm sitting there waiting for Louisville to come take that from me. And every time they were going to do it, Michigan State hit a 3. I don't know how realistic that is to think that they can do that against UConn or against really anyone for that matter. So UConn, Michigan State, how are you seeing this one?
Yeah, I had both of these teams, Michigan State and UConn, minus the points over the weekend, and both of them came through for me pretty easily, quite honestly. The thing with UConn is it's the way that they play defense. You can kind of already tell if a team's going to be able to score against them or not. And the reason why I took UConn is because UCLA was a very bad matchup to try to score against UConn's defense. Essentially, UConn does as good of a job as anyone in the country at preventing catch and shoot threes. You cannot swing the ball against this team. And they're going to play drop coverage and make you dribble into their defense. There's 2 ways to play that style of defense. Either you keep your big man low, which makes you have to shoot floaters and pull up jumpers oversized, which is what a lot of teams do. North Carolina with Henry Visar is a very classic example of that. Or you play your big man high, let the ball handler, so to speak, get in front of the big man, and then you recover and block the shot. That's what you call a rim funnel drop coverage. And that's exactly what UConn does. They had 5 blocks in that game against UCLA. UCLA shot a ton of twos, 36 twos to 13 threes. But they only shot 39% on those twos because their guards are small and not that athletic. And if you get Donovan Dent going downhill, Terrace Reed will say, get that garbage out of here. Michigan State's the exact same way. They don't get to the rim. They're 346th in average 2-point distance per KenPom. Their shots are all floaters. Their shots are all post-ups. Their shots are all hooks. They're not getting to the rim and finishing over length and size. That is a disaster against UConn because UConn is going to make Jeremy Fears, who is the best passer in the sport, play isolation ball. They're going to make him get downhill and they're going to make him finish over length. And you don't want that if you're Michigan State. You want to run your sets. You don't want to be, pressured. You want to play ball movement basketball. These are Michigan State's second in the country in assist rate, and UConn is 7th in assist rate. Michigan State lets you run action. UConn does not let you run action. And in two teams that run some of the prettiest offenses in the sport, you have to favor the team that will actually be able to run their stuff, and that is UConn.
Yeah, the more I sort of look at this game, the more UConn makes a ton of sense here. And as a sports bettor, obviously, we don't care we just want who we're on in that given game to win. So I don't, just because I was anti UConn for a couple of weeks does not mean that I wouldn't happily take them here. I just felt like they kind of came in for a stretch. They were very overrated in the market. And then I see this number open 1 and I'm like, man, it almost feels like surprisingly they're undervalued. And I couldn't really understand why, but maybe it's, Michigan State looked very impressive first weekend, destroyed North Dakota State. I think the final score, like you were even saying, well, we kind of got there relatively easily with Michigan State, but Louisville, their interior defense is awful, a disaster. And Michigan State could not get close to the rim in that game. Like I said, I feel like I was waiting to get backdoored by Louisville, and then Cone Carr would hit a 3 in front of his bench. You can't rely on that. Michigan State in that game, Matt, 11 for 26 from 3. Are they going to come out and just hit 11 threes against UConn? And the problem is, for me, it's a lot of those threes came off of kind of a decent transition opportunity that Louisville was able to maybe not let them get to the rim on a rim run, for a layup, but they get a kick out and suddenly someone was open there to hit a 3, which they hit. If they don't get that against UConn, I'd be very, very surprised if they win. So I'm actually leaning UConn.
They're not going to get that.
Right.
You want to stat off of that point? Off of what you're saying with the way that Michigan State's probably not sustainable from deep and they're going to have to score inside the arc. Michigan State's 22-0 when they shoot above 50% from 2-point range. And they're 5-7 when they shoot below it. UConn is 12th in the country in 2-point defense at 45.7%. So more than likely they're going to be below 50% where they are 5-7 and not above 50% where they're 22-0.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you can get UConn at essentially a pick without having to lay points, that's probably a pretty good bet. That's one when we get off the show, I'll have to think long and hard about adding that. I think I got
one more stat for you before we move on.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Non-Alex Karaban UConn Huskies in the last 3 games. I tweeted this out, so this is why you want to follow me on Twitter. Non-Alex Karaban UConn Huskies in the last 3 games from deep are 7 of 46. That is 15.2%. So UConn is winning these games with everyone other than Alex Karaban being horrific from beyond the arc. If they are even below average from beyond the arc, this is going to be a very hard team to beat.
Yeah, winning games and I mean they ended up in the end winning comfortably against against a UCLA team that even without Billadou, I still thought was a pretty solid team. I thought they had a chance there, and that was a really pretty solid second half from UConn. I have it's again I shouldn't make statements about teams before the bracket comes out, because even I was
I think UConn's like probably overrated too, but I think when there's a clear matchup situation with the team, then like I'm gonna take that over my value in the power rankings any day.
Yeah, no, I totally am with you there. And sorry, I just looked down to Twitter to see the "with love" Jerry McNamara tweet that we knew was coming. He will be the next head coach of Syracuse basketball, which I live 30 minutes from the Dome, so I can't be too upset about that. He also brought Siena to a tournament, so shout out to GMAC and Syracuse fans. I hope it works out because he's such a legend here, Matt, that if it doesn't work out, that's going to be really sad. I mean, he's like, it's not going to be the same as Autry not working out. No one really cares about him in these parts. GMAC is everyone's like childhood hero if you're my age. So hopefully it works out for Cuse, and we'll see who Siena gets as a head coach. But just to go back to the chat for a second, so we will have the parlay. So here's what we're going to do today. The parlay will be NIT games either today or tomorrow. So all four NIT are fair game for today's parlay. And then for tomorrow, the show parlay will be from the NCAA tournament games. So these two games are fair game, but we'll hold them off for tomorrow. One more announcement. Total Basis starts tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. So we will talk Giants, Yankees, and we will talk futures and anything else you guys want to talk about in the chat. And then we'll have another show for Thursday for opening day. And that show is daily, Monday through Friday, going forward, starting tomorrow. That's 9 a.m. The college basketball show will remain at 10 a.m. So tomorrow you've got to deal with me for 2 hours. So get ready for that. You got baseball at 9, and then Matt is going to be back with me at 10. Garth, very much appreciate you. Did not have to donate today because we're going to talk about all the games, but we absolutely appreciate it. And so let's get into the NIT. 2 games tonight, 2 games tomorrow. Garth wants to talk Tulsa, Wichita State. We'll specifically the total, but we'll do side and total. Now, I was at the first meeting between these two teams in Tulsa back in January. Tulsa destroyed Wichita in that game. And since, Wichita has made some really nice adjustments. They won the second meeting at home. They won the conference tournament meeting easily. Certainly didn't help that David Green left that conference tournament game with injury. He still hasn't played. From what I'm hearing, it's a shoulder, I believe, is what he's dealing with. And Eric Conkle over the weekend said that he hadn't participated in practice, hadn't done anything contact, but he desperately wants to get out there. I know that over the weekend he was pretty much ruled out, as of like Sunday morning. So he'll be a game time decision here. I got to be honest, Tulsa, I'm a little bit surprised that they're still in this tournament without him. Stephen F. Austin almost got him on the first round, and I think UNLV was just a very good, favorable matchup for Tulsa. So my question to you is, if David Green's not there, does Wichita State get them again here?
It's very possible if they don't get him again. The interesting fact, like this is basically an NBA series. This is game 4. They've already played 3 times, so these teams know each other well. And like you mentioned, game 1, Tulsa won easy, scored 93 points. Game 2, close game, but a close Tulsa loss. And then game 3, easy Wichita State win. So like, yeah, every game it's the pendulum has started to swing towards Wichita. Not a coincidence. Tulsa's 2-point makes in those 3 games went from 25 in game 1 to 16 in game 2 to just 11 in game 3. Tulsa only has 2 players that have more than 66 made twos all year, which is basically 2 per game. They only have 2 players that have more than 2 2-point makes per game. Tylen Riley, their point guard, and David Green. So the fact that David Green missed that third matchup and Tulsa left early and only played 12 minutes, and Tulsa only made 11 2-pointers all game, tells you that if he does not play in this game, Tulsa will be all 3-pointers, which isn't the worst thing. They are the number 5 3-point shooting team in the country, but there's no balance there. If David Green is in and they do have that 2-point balance and they are able to combat Wichita State on the boards, which they did an okay job of in the regular season, I think Tulsa's fine. But without Green, they're way too dependent on the 3-pointer.
I got a really good stat here that the Tulsa associate AD gave me when I was out there. First of all, shout out to Tulsa. They were awesome to me when I visited there earlier this year. One thing I will say, they probably will get a decent crowd tonight, like relative to what they've had the first couple games. There was quite a few Wichita State fans when I went. I guess those two schools are not too far away, and Wichita State does travel, so I'd imagine that you'll get a good amount of Wichita State fans that'll make this trip, knowing that they probably don't want to go all the way to Indy and battle the Final Four crowd to watch the final. So there was 5,100 at the game that I went to. I believe it was Tulsa's biggest crowd of the year. I would not be surprised if it was close to that tonight. But I was going to get back to a stat that was brought to my attention when I was out there, and I think we were close enough to the end of the season where it probably still holds up. And it's going to also sort of highlight how important David Green is to this matchup. There was only two other teams that had a higher plus minus for the starting five this year in college basketball than Tulsa. They were Arizona and Houston. That's pretty good company right there. That, if you look at with just the starting five, their plus minus, they were third in college basketball. Only two teams better were Arizona, Houston. That is very good company, but also that means you take David Green off the floor, who's arguably their best starter. That's a pretty big hit when, that I don't know that they have the replacement person there. And I think, again, you go back to the Stephen F. Austin game, they were on the ropes there. It looked like they were going to lose that game. And UNLV, again, I just don't think they ever really matched up well with Tulsa, whereas Wichita State's figured them out. Go ahead.
I also don't think UNLV cared. I don't think
Kastner cared. His players might not have.
Yeah, I don't think his players wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Imagine you're living in Vegas, your season's basically over, you've made your money for the year, and then you got to go to Oklahoma, play a basketball game. Their starters played all but 10 minutes of the entire game. There were 10 total bench minutes. They didn't want to be there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was also on the heels of having to go to Irvine. So it was like the second road game for UNLV. Yeah, I definitely kind of, I'll be honest, that was one I didn't watch a ton of, but it felt like UNLV was out of it from the opening tip. Like it just didn't seem, it didn't seem like they were interested. Anytime I turned that game on, they looked very uninterested, which was obviously benefit Tulsa there. Wichita State's going to be interested.
One of my favorite and easiest bets of a long time was Wichita State as an underdog at Oklahoma State, because only one of those teams wanted to play that game. And unfortunately, now that we're 2 rounds into the NIT, there's probably no teams left that don't want to be there. But in the first 2 rounds, there were definitely teams that did not want to be there, and Oklahoma State was one of them.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think that they surprised themselves that they beat Davidson. And the only reason I didn't play Wichita State over the weekend, I kind of got duped by, Anthony Roy's playing and all these guys are going to play, which, some of their guys came back. But yeah, Wichita State in the second half of that game destroyed them. It wasn't even close. And yeah, I think if I had to play this one again, I would keep an eye on the David Green status, but I don't know, trying to read between the lines on how Conkle was talking in that interview that he did over the weekend. If he's playing, he's probably not 100%. I don't think he's close to 100%.
This is the one game of the 4 that I don't have any action in. So,
real quick before we move on to the next game, just because Garth did ask the question, over or under, what way do you lean on the total?
If David Green's out, I don't necessarily like the over, just because, like I mentioned earlier, Tulsa is going to be so 3-point dependent. And of course, they can make them, but I'm never going to advise to take an over if the team is going to take 50-60% of their shots from 3, which is probably what happens here. It's just it will hit if they make them, and it will not hit if they miss. I'm always going to prefer taking an over if I feel like a team is going to be successful inside the arc.
All right, let's go to the other game tonight out at the Pit, another place that was overly nice to Trig when he went there. Listen, I'm a nobody media guy, so the big schools usually are go ahead and buy a ticket. But sometimes when I'm in this A10 Mountain West range, I'll they'll give me the credentials, and it's hit or miss. Tulsa and then New Mexico may have rolled out the red carpet maybe more than anyone ever has. So love my time there. I got to go to a New Mexico Boise State game on a Friday night, sold out at the Pit. And I guess that's where I want to start the handicap. I don't think the Pit is going to sell out tonight. I do think they could have eight or 9,000. They're not getting 14 for this game. So like right off the bat, I can't give them like the full bump for home court that I normally would, because it's like, I think they had 7,000 for the George Washington game. That's pretty good.
9.2.
Oh, they had 9,000 for that game. Okay. So that's, yeah. I mean, listen, that is as passionate of a fan base that I've ever been around. Just in general, like New Mexico fans, super, they're going to come out and support regardless. So yeah, I think you could get 8,000 or 9,000 in there tonight.
4,
I don't think you'll get
4,000 more fans than any of the other home games over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, I think there was like 1,500 at Berkeley. So like, that's you do want to sort of do your homework, like when you're trying to assess home court here. Now, obviously, just like the aura of the Pit gives you a little bit of home court for New Mexico. I couldn't add the full points for home court because I think my full rating for, like, I usually will give New Mexico the absolute full marks that I would give anyone for home court. I'm not sure I'm going to do that here. Big thing here, like Dayton Albury, I think he had the flu over the weekend. Will he play? Maybe, maybe not. I don't. So for me, it didn't really matter in the fact that, like, I do like St. Joe's in this game. Like, just from the standpoint, you were saying, like, teams caring about this tournament. I think you're right. Everyone left, for the most part, wants to be here and wants to win. And for St. Joe's, like, to come back and beat Cal, they didn't play well. I don't think they weren't interested at Cal. I think they didn't play a great first half, and Cal just went nuts from distance again, like they did in the first game. Cooled off a little bit, and St. Joe's battled and stayed in that game. My gut tells me that St. Joe's is going to hang around here because they care. I think, Steve Donahue takes over this program, right? Like last second. Billy Lang takes the NBA job. He has to throw Deuce Jones off the team. So kicks the best player off the team. Like, since that point, this team has totally rallied around that. They finished third in the A10. My gut says they'd love to, like, pay this season off with, like, as good of a showing as they can in the NIT. And then, of course, to go to Colorado State and win, hang around and beat Cal. I don't think they're going quietly here. But, Matt, it is the Pit. New Mexico has played well. Do you think this is another blowout, though, for New Mexico? They didn't get challenged at all in the first two games.
I do think it's another blowout. I'll be the other way. I'll go the other way with you here. I think that, maybe St. Joe's hangs around for a half. That's what George Washington did. 25-point game, but it was 4 at halftime. And then New Mexico, without Dayton Albury, like you mentioned, who very well might be back here, blew the absolute cover off of George Washington. It wasn't even close. And I think that's going to be more of the same here. St. Joe's, I'm not sure if they're going back and forth, east-west, but
they're not.
I would assume they're just on the West Coast. It's only been a couple of days. And like, that sounds fun, like good for them. But the thing with New Mexico, first of all, I love their coach, Eric Olin. He's one of my 5 favorite coaches. He's not one of the 5 best coaches in the country, but he's one of my 5 favorite coaches. And he does a better job than anyone in the entire country at one particular thing, and it's scouting who makes threes and who doesn't make threes. New Mexico does an unbelievable job of punking you into taking threes with your bad shooters and covering up everything with your good shooters. So you got to look at the scouting report. Is your team a team that has a couple of three-point shooters or a lot of three-point shooters? And for St. Joe's, a team that's 325th in three-point shooting, they only have 2 players on their entire roster that shoot over 30% from 3. That's Jaden Glover Toscano, and Austin Williford. Outside of that, not only do they have poor three-point shooters, but they have poor three-point shooters that shoot a ton. Derek Simpson is 30% flat on 166 attempts. Desir Haskins is 29% on 116 attempts. Anthony Finkley is 29% on 106 attempts. If Eric Olin sees they have 3 guys shooting 30% or worse on over 100 attempts, he's like licking his chops. He's like, we're letting these guys fire away, and we're going to have the rest of our team hell-bent on getting steals, which they do better than almost anyone in the country. And St. Joe's coughs it up at a very high rate. They also don't rebound. So New Mexico is going to take 10, 15 more shots than St. Joe's. They're going to cover up the threes from their good shooters, and St. Joe's covers this game if Simpson, Haskins, and Finkley shoot well above 30%, and like maybe they do, but the law of averages suggests they will not. And with New Mexico and their crowd, their biggest crowd in the NIT in both of the first two meetings, I think they really care about this game. They're almost into the semifinals. I think they win this game by 15.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think maybe I got too attached to St. Joe's after they came back and won on Sunday, Sunday night. But like, I guess for me, it's just I feel like New Mexico is gonna get like challenged at some point in this tournament. I think they were given, George Washington rolled in there with like I don't know. I kind of figured that they'd get blown out after beating Utah Valley. I actually went against George Washington in the Utah Valley game. The first round was just a runaway. So I don't know. My gut tells me that this is a tougher game for New Mexico, but if New Mexico is hitting their threes, maybe it gets out of hand. I've liked St. Joe's ability to defend the rim and defend the paint. So I don't think they're just going to get easy shots on the interior, but New Mexico isn't a bad three-point shooting team at all. I believe top 60 in that metric this year. And the one player you referenced on St. Joe's, Matt, had a bad three-point shooting game against Cal. I now think he's below 30%. So I think Glover Toscano is now their only one that is shooting over 30% from three. I'll have to double check that. But
Williford's still at 35%.
Yeah. He is. Okay. So I must have read that wrong. I didn't know if his I think he went 1 for 4 from three last game, and I thought I saw that he was below that. But no, all really good points. And again, I think there's ways that St. Joe's keeps it close. It would probably need to just be like a gutted out type effort to keep it close for St. Joe's, and one that I'm going to probably bank on tonight. So again, this one got shoved in my face a little bit. I was at 10.5, 11. I thought if Albury got ruled out, it might come down to like 9.5, 9. It looks like he's probably going to play from what I'm hearing now. He had the flu. We'll see. That's one that I don't know. I may have to reassess, but I like St. Joe's. They cash for me on Sunday. I'm hoping they can come out and just gut it out again, keep it close, because I definitely think if they play well, they're in the game. I mean, it's like they need a big defensive effort, no question. They need a big defensive effort, and they probably need New Mexico to not shoot the lights out from three.
Yeah, for sure.
So the NIT game I got wrong over the weekend was UNC Wilmington. Dayton went into Trask Coliseum, dug themselves a 10-point hole, and then played arguably their best 30 minutes of basketball of the whole year. I mean, I'm sitting there with Wilmington at a good number. I had 3.5, up 26-16. The Trask Coliseum crowd, they rarely lose there. I'm feeling great. And then Dayton went off. I mean, that was as impressive of a 30 minutes that I think the Flyers have played most of the year. Deshae Montgomery was all over the place, played one of his best games that I've watched this year, 20 points, but I mean, he was all over the place, making play after play. I didn't know how motivated Dayton would be. Of course, they got to Sunday in the Atlantic 10. They're sitting there thinking, okay, if we can beat a team that we probably feel like we can beat, we're going to be in the NCAA tournament. They fall short there, end up back in the NIT where they were last year, get displaced from their arena. They had to think that they were likely still going to be on the road, because I don't think they could have thought that Illinois State was going to win at Wake. So I didn't think they were going to be overly motivated. I figured they walked over Bradley because Bradley didn't want to be there either. But Dayton looked awesome in that game against Wilmington. And now they get the home game because Illinois State upset Wake Forest. So this had a little bit of a move up to 7.5. I kind of agree with that. I think Dayton might be too much for Illinois State. What do you think here, Dayton, Illinois State?
Yeah, I've been on Dayton both NIT games, and that's gone very well for me because it was, a little bit of first half issues, but I barely had to look at the two Dayton games that I had because they were pretty easy. I guess we had opposite reactions to the second half of that UNCW game, given our stances. I kind of pegged Dayton as a team that was really going to care about this tournament because 3 of their best players are seniors, and they're seniors that are defensive-minded seniors, and Javon Bennett, Jordan Durkak, and Keontae Jones. Defense, when you want to try hard, defense is going to kind of show up. And then Amael Latang as a center is just someone who big character guy, so I figured he'd try hard. And then Deshane Montgomery, not a character guy, but I think he wants to get back to P5 hoops, and playing well here is going to help. So they've shown out in the first 2 games, not necessarily close. They get the home game. They're the significantly more athletic team. But what I don't want to discount is this Illinois State team that brings everyone back from last year is now 5-0 in postseason games with this core. They went 3-0 in the CBI last year, and now they're 2-0 in the NIT, covering both games super easily. I was on Kent State. That was an NIT game I got wrong, and it was not even close. Illinois State plays through the post with Chase Walker at the 5, and now Chase Walker is going to be posting up against a 7'1" guy in Amael Latang, and Dayton loves to double team because they want their steals. So it's going to be a little bit of an issue for them. Illinois State is going to have to make threes to be successful here. But Illinois State struggles to defend athleticism. They're 2-5 when teams get to the free throw line at a 42% rate against them, because when they foul, they're not that deep. And when they, they're a very good 2-point defense, but it doesn't work if you're so athletic that you can score over their small front court. So in those 7 games, they've allowed a 42% free throw rate. They're 2-5, and they've allowed 1.15 points per possession in 6 of those 7 games. Dayton's first in the entire country in getting the free throw line. I think Dayton scores easily. I think Illinois State hits shots. I think this game probably goes over.
Yeah. So, for those of you, Rob Vino is still, he'll be out the rest of this week. He's on tour with his son is a professional musician. Actually, the band is incredible. And, I believe he's on tour on the West Coast right now. So that's awesome. I think he's getting to bounce around to a couple of different West Coast cities. So Rob will be back next week. But the reason I bring Rob up is, just to let you know that he'll be back. But also he texted me on Sunday, and he was, I think, fired up. I think the Kinzinger 3 helped him in some way. I don't know if I think he either had the over, which I believe that 3-point shot against Wake Forest put it over by a half point, or I don't know how it helped him, but he was fired up about that. So my text back to him, Matt, was it's about time for Kinzinger, right? I was because we've talked about on this show his shooting woes relative to what he's been his career, and it's that's massive for Illinois State. If he's going to start ripping from 3 he's supposed to, right, which he hasn't really done all year, then I could definitely kind of see them hanging around in this game. If he can't, I think Dayton kind of just goes off. Their press was really good against Wilmington. That was the biggest thing. Wilmington just could not get into any sort of offense. Once they sort of started ramping up the pressure, they just couldn't get anything going. They turned it over, just couldn't get into any offense. And that's really what Dayton did most of the second half, was just the ramp up the pressure. And they extended, that was a 1-point game with a minute to go in the first half. And it was quickly out of hand. So if I had to pick, I think that's the way I see this one going, is Dayton's press getting the best of Illinois State. And of course, Chase Walker in a game that's going to be high pressure is not probably as big of an impact. And I think this is another one where, the home fans will probably show up. Dayton almost always gets a good turn. Even when they're mad at the team, they still show up, which was a lot of this year. And they still had a great turnout for every game. So probably looking at a pretty nice home court environment here.
Yeah, and if you look at the teams that Illinois State has played that you can decidedly say are more athletic than them, right? Those have all been high-scoring games. Even though they beat Wake, there were still 153 points in that game. You think Utah State, a team that's definitely more athletic than Illinois State, 161 points. If you look at USC, obviously USC is more athletic. They're a power conference team. 154 points. So all 3 of those games against probably the 3 most athletic teams they've played all year, the most Power 5 looking competition, USC, who isn't a Power 5, Utah State, and Wake, those have all gone over 153. I don't think that's a surprise. I think that Illinois State's defense is ranked high because of their scheme and their ability to slow down teams equally athletic or slightly more athletic. I think Dayton's athleticism is going to allow them to score pretty easily around the rim.
All right, one more NIT game, and then we will figure out what we want to put in the parlay. This one, so I guess the first thing to point out about Auburn, so prior to this week, I would do almost like an NIT injury report of sorts, but the reality is there hasn't been as much to report because most of the teams that have had guys either not play or not care are now out of the tournament. A lot of these teams are full strength. The most notable probably omission of any of these 4 games is Keyshawn Murphy. I guess he just didn't tell Auburn he was done for the year. Just didn't show up. From what I heard, it was news to Stephen Pearl and the coaching staff that he was not available. He just straight up no-showed, and that does not bode well for playing the rest of this tournament. So I almost think that you could just assume that he's going to be out. I don't know if it's, it hasn't mattered yet, but Auburn hasn't covered yet. They haven't covered either of these big numbers. I cashed with South Alabama in the first round, kicking myself for not taking Seattle. It was like right there for me, and I just kind of decided to leave it off. And of course they finished strong, only lost by 6. That number was as high as 14.5. So I guess I'm in the same place here where it's another big number and another one that I'm not sure Auburn just necessarily covers. I've seen a lot of good stuff so far from Nevada. They've had everyone play. They look to be taking this seriously. So I don't know. It's not something I've bet yet, but kind of intrigued by the Wolfpack getting all those points. What do you think, Auburn, Nevada?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Auburn doesn't care. Auburn beat South Alabama. They were losing it by 6 at halftime against South Alabama, and South Alabama did not have their second leading scorer and only good 3-point shooter in Adam Olson. I was on South Alabama as well. I got a little concerned when Olson was ruled out. It didn't matter because Auburn doesn't care. And then Seattle, Seattle, even after they went ballistic from deep against Auburn, moved up to the 292nd best offense in the country. Auburn winning that game by 6 is not any level remotely close to an impressive performance. So that's, like you said, 2 non-covers, but also just 2 very average performances for an Auburn team that I'm surprised even accepted this NIT bid. I think Stephen Pearl kind of made their team do it, and that's why Keyshawn Murphy did not show up. And like you mentioned, Nevada has actually significantly outperformed 2 teams in Murray State and Liberty that did want to be there. Liberty especially, playing all their seniors, Caden Matheny playing through injury, it didn't matter. Even though this is a travel for Nevada, Auburn has not played teams that can match their power conference athleticism at all in South Alabama and Seattle. Nevada's not huge, but they do have athletes. They do have physicality. They do have guys that get to the free throw line just like Auburn does. And I would just be very surprised if Auburn cares enough about this game to blow out a team that can sort of match their physicality.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the South Alabama game. They got completely outplayed. They just went absolutely nuts from 3 in the second half, where it was just like, some of those threes were 30-plus footers. They weren't good shots per se, but they just, they do have a couple of guys that can rip it from deep, and Richie Riley's playing his zone. And if you're going to hit from 33 feet, 30 feet, like some of they just bombed bombs away in the second half. There was a stretch, where it was like a 1-point game. And then suddenly I was starting to sweat like 19 and a half because they hit like 5 straight threes. That's unlikely. Nevada's actually been very solid defensively. More, in the first round, I'm kind of watching the Murray State game and I'm like, okay, maybe Alfred's spreading the minutes around a little bit, trying to gauge like how much he wanted to be here because, Steve Alfred's a veteran coach, and I wouldn't have been totally surprised if he used this tournament as like, hey, let's get everyone some minutes and see what we've got here. But definitely more serious, in my opinion, against Liberty. Closed that game out, covered the number. And yeah, like I think Nevada's going to sort of be up for this opportunity. It's a lot of, I guess somewhat of the same way I looked at St. Joe's, sort of like, okay, like, we're on the road, but like we're up for it. We want to be here. We want to see if we can advance to the Final Four weekend. And that's, of course, where all these teams are going. Anyone that wins the quarterfinal round will get to go be part of Final Four weekend, which, I don't know if it's as hype as like when you used to get to go to the Garden, but that's pretty cool. Getting to be part of the Final Four weekend and play at Gamebridge or wherever they're going to play. I think maybe Hinkle for the semis, Gamebridge for the finals. So it's like, I think Nevada, though, for sure is like up for like, that's a huge, like going to potentially get to win, to beat Auburn, their home floor, in SEC school, and then get to go to like the Final Four of this. Like, that's like a big prize, in my opinion, for Nevada, especially this year. This wasn't a year where like the Wolfpack were like some shoe-in NCAA tournament team. So I see Nevada much more motivated than Auburn here.
And Steve Alford, Indiana legend. So he wants to come back up.
I got off. I was driving through Indiana. I got off I was starving, and like the only thing for like I saw was like a steak and shake or something. So I got off, went to get food, and like Steve Alford's hotel, which was a very modest, like almost looked like a motel, was like right there. And I looked it up. I mean, it is like, I'm pretty sure like it's, it's his, or he, whatever. Like, and it was, that was like the two things on the exit was, steak and shake and his hotel. Nothing else. Nothing else anywhere.
Got to bring them back home. And I'll be in Indianapolis in a couple of weekends for the Final Four. I think that them being there would be very good for the program.
Yeah. So, that's one I'm certainly interested in. So we still have a few minutes left here. So let's, I'm going to go to the chat because there is a couple questions. We can finish this out with a couple of chat questions. But first, let's lock in our NIT parlay. I will let you go first. Any of the 4 games, who's your best bet?
I'm going to take the Dayton over 138.5.
Over 138.5. All right. So that is a Wednesday game. I'm torn. I'm torn between Nevada and Wichita State. I'm going to take one of those dogs for the parlay. So we could make it, if you are in line with those, we could make it a 3-teamer. The folks like 3-teamers. So it's either, if you like either of those, we can make it a 3-teamer, or I'll pick. I'm going to leave it up to you. Do you want to go 2? All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take Wichita State plus the 3.5. My gut tells me David Green is not going to play, and Wichita State's they've made all the adjustments off of that first meeting, in my opinion, where they're the more likely team to win this game. And I just don't think it matters a ton that Tulsa's at home, their biggest home crowd of the year. So Tulsa, you want to talk about just quickly, like numbers and stuff. I think they had 2,000 over the weekend and maybe like 1,500 or 1,600 for the Stephen F. Austin game. If they get a big crowd tonight, it's because all the Wichita State fans rolled up, which is essentially what they did when I was there. That was a great crowd, but it was a great crowd because there was a lot of yellow. I even tweeted it out. I did a video. I said, a lot of yellow here in the crowd today. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wichita sort of rolls in with a little bit of a contingent. I think it's like a 2-hour drive for them. Yes. So I'm going to take Wichita State again. My gut just says that Green, if he does play, is not close to 100%. And he'd be like giving it a go because he wants to be out there. I think what's more likely, because it's like a shoulder thing and he hadn't done any contact, is he sits this one out, hope his team wins, and then he gets to be part of like the Final Four weekend. That's what I kind of think is happening. And I just think without Green, I'd be really surprised if Tulsa wins that game.
Yeah.
So I will go Wichita. Yeah, I will go Wichita. We'll call it plus 3.5. Looks like what that is. And that's one that that goes back to 4. I think I haven't given this out or bet it yet, but I think if that went back to 4, like if he did play and suddenly it was like 4.5 or 5, I think I'd still play Wichita there. I'd almost rather him get ruled in and then have it move a couple points, because I just don't think he's going to be a huge factor, even if he does play. And there's no way he's going to play his like normal minutes to sort of constitute him moving the number.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna hop into the chat here. We'll go 2-teamer today. I'll tell you guys what. We'll go 2-teamer today. Tomorrow, Matt and I will put a 3-teamer together with all of the Sweet 16 games, because we'll have more games to choose from. So all the Sweet 16 is going to go tomorrow, or well, the rest of the Sweet 16. We did the East region. If you've missed the show, as always, the show is on demand on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. We talked East region, Duke, St. John's, Michigan State, UConn. The rest of tomorrow's show is going to be entirely devoted to the rest of the bracket. So we'll do the other three regions. I was just kind of scrolling the chat here. And we'll go. Yeah, Firefighter says Wichita is plus 3.5, even money on Hard Rock. If that's the case, you can probably get 4 or 4.5 at like minus 110 or minus 115. That's a very good bet. I'm hoping. I do see Tulsa at some of this more square books start to take a little bit of money. That'd be great. Please, someone bet Tulsa. If you know, that would be great. Because like right here, we've got a 4 Fanatics plus 4 minus 110. So keep an eye out for that. I think at 4, Wichita is like a very good bet right there.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, Green comes in, changes a lot. But if you don't think he's playing, then
yeah, and again, it's like just trying to read the tea leaves on Conkle saying that he hasn't done any contact in practice and stuff like that. Like, that's concerning, especially if it's like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the shoulder. I thought I saw him with like a big ice pack on his shoulder. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to monitor throughout the day. All right. So yeah, we will be no half points or alts on DK. There will be. On DraftKings should let you alt anything. If you just click the game there, I'm pretty sure at some point during the day, there's going to be that slide bar of alt numbers. I'm pretty sure DraftKings will let you alt bet pretty much anything. So, Billy Humphrey says double dip on the Dayton game. Matt's over plus the line. I mean, I think if it goes over, Dayton's probably covering. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I would agree. That would be where I lean. I didn't take it, but that would be where I lean.
Recap on the parlay. Yeah, one more time. We've got a 2-teamer today. I am on Wichita State plus 3.5. That game goes tonight. Matt is using one of the NIT games tomorrow. He's going to go with the Dayton, Illinois State Dayton over 138.5. So that is the 2-teamer today. DK only does half points usually. I am like certain that on a side, they won't give you like the traditional like minus 120.5 point. I'm certain they will let you pick the line. I think they force you to go at least a point though, maybe 1.5 points. I could be wrong about that, but like I thought, DraftKings, I've been heavily limited there a long time, so I don't log into that one very often anymore. But I could have swore that was a good place to do alt stuff. So anyway, shop around. There's someone says juice like an orange. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that I'm not surprised about. But yeah, shop around. Get yourself there's a lot of options to bet pretty much anywhere now. So if you can't bet it there, bet it somewhere else. I think that's a good note to leave on, right? Always shop around, try to get the best number. And Matt and I will be back in the morning. Again, one more programming note for tomorrow. 2 shows for me, for my baseball peeps. We are back. Myself, Tokyo Brandon, Brian Leonard, 9 a.m. Eastern, first total bases of the year. We'll talk Yankees, Giants, and then we are answering the rest of the time. We're just going to answer questions about futures, win totals, whatever you guys want to talk about, whatever you guys ask about. Matt and I will be back 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow to talk about the other 3 regions, break those down, and we'll give you guys a 3-teamer tomorrow. That we'll commit to it right now. We will figure out a Sweet 16 3-teamer for you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, very much appreciate it. It is also $5 Tuesday at Wager Talk. I should point that out. Check that out. Everyone's got $5 plays up for sale. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the morning.